Phil Steele, I hope you're doing well, sir. Welcome in the game here in T-Town.
Hey, Ryan, how the heck are you today? I'm doing fine.
Well, Phil, this time of the year, the energy's beginning to pick up. The energy here in Tuscaloosa, I'm sure it's that's the way it is outside of this part of the country as well. Everybody's got college football on their mind, the momentum building as we approach the start of the college football season.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's about, 12 days away till the first real football kicks off for the season. So when you write about college football 365 days of the year, it's always a lot more fun when the games are going on.
Bill, I know we talked about 45 days ago when the publication was first hitting the newsstands, and now we've had a chance to let that marinate a little bit, and I want to go back and recap a little bit. What are your expectations as we're a little bit closer to the Alabama Crimson Tide starting in Orlando against Louisville? What are your true expectations of what this Crimson Tide team will be able to accomplish in 2018?
I think it's going to be a big year for Alabama when, really going out on a limb there, huh, Ryan? But when I look at Alabama this year, normally they come in number 120 or 110 on my experience chart. This year they come in at number 50. I think they have one of the best quarterback situations in the country. I mean, when your backup quarterback is Jalen Hurts, who's 26-2 as a starter and had a 17-1 ratio last year, you're in pretty good shape. And then you look at the rest of the units. Almost every unit on the team ranks in my top 10. And then you factor in the schedule this year. Alabama figures to be a double-digit favorite in every game. The only game they're not currently a double-digit favorite in, they're about a 9-point favorite against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. So this is an Alabama team that very well could be a double-digit favorite in every game. And Nick Saban only has one unbeaten season so far. I think this year's team has that chance.
Bill, we love the rankings. You look at Alabama's offensive line, you look at their linebackers, you look at so many areas, quarterbacks, running backs. But I want to ask you about wide receivers because you've got these guys maybe ranked a little bit lower than what we expect. And just going back to the wide receivers, what are you expecting? Maybe what's preventing this team from being a little bit higher up in your rankings? What are you expecting from the receiver unit here in Tuscaloosa?
I think it's pretty high, especially, when you look at the fact that last year you look at the receiving core and the top receiver, Calvin Ridley, was clearly the go-to man for Jalen Hurts the entire season, but didn't even top 1,000 yards. The number 2, 3, and 4 receivers all had under 275 yards receiving. This year I think it'll be better balanced, more passing with Tua at QB. And I like Jerry Jeudy. He's a guy that is probably the future at the wide receiver position. Henry Ruggs is someone that was impressive late in the season last year. Devontae Smith. So there's a lot of young talent at the wide receivers. And I think statistically, if you look at the top 4 receivers from last year and compare them to the top 4 receivers this year, the Tide receivers will be more productive.
Bill, I know that when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, his arm and the way that he can stretch the field, the way that he can put the ball in those tight windows is going to open Alabama's offense up a little bit. But Nick Saban has built this dynasty around a couple of different things. For one, it's the defensive side of the football. Number 2, they've been known for running backs, right? Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, winning the Heisman Trophy, but it's been a lot more than just that. Are they going to get away from what they do best, running the football, and maybe use the skill set that Tua Tagovailoa has with his arm? Do you expect them to do that, or do you expect to go back and maybe reestablish that dominant running attack that they've had in years past?
Yeah, I tell you what, there'll be more passing, but this is not going to turn into Texas Tech. So that's, let's face it, Alabama wins their games on defense, special teams, and running the football. That'll be the case this year as well. But in the games where the teams stack the box against them, I think you'll see Tua have himself a bigger year and make the opponents pay for stacking the box on him, which is something Jalen Hurts didn't always do last year. So, no, I'm not looking for a run-pass ratio of 70% passing and 30% run, but probably a little more than what they've done the last couple of years.
Bill, we look at the forecast for the 2018 season. You've got Alabama as your pick to win the national title. You've got them playing Clemson out in Santa Clara, California at Levi Stadium. But I want to go back here for just a minute, okay? Let's play the negative nanny type game, okay? Negative here for just a minute. If Alabama's not in that semifinal game, college football playoffs, if they're not a part of the final game there in Santa Clara, California, what do you think will prevent this team from accomplishing those goals that they have right now and not being a part of the conversation if we're looking at this Crimson Tide team? What's one thing you think might prevent this team from making it to Santa Clara, California?
Linebacker injuries, because they've already lost three of the guys that I was projecting on the team. Last year we saw the linebacker injuries, things popped up, and they nearly lost to Mississippi State on the road and then lost to Auburn. They lose a lot more depth at linebacker, 2 or 3 more guys. Then all of a sudden what was a major strength on the team turns into a question mark. The other part would be the secondary. Now, Nick Saban coaches the secondary himself. You'd think that it's going to be in great shape, but they are all brand-new starters this year. And then the final thing would probably be the Iron Bowl. It would be the one thing that would keep them out. And I think when you look at the Tide this year, a loss in the Iron Bowl, maybe Auburn repeating as the SEC West champ, could be enough to keep them out. But to me, the odds are pretty slim on that happening.
That might be a great segue. Let's talk about these Auburn Tigers in this state. What are your expectations for the Tigers in 2018?
Well, this Auburn team is probably just as good as last year's, and last year's was a pretty good team. And not a lot of folks around the country remember they were the SEC West champs last year. You start with Jared Stidham, one of the top QBs out there. He's got the size, got the arm strength, and after going through his first start here at Auburn, where they went into Death Valley and took on Clemson, and he took a lot of sacks and had a poor game, there's really nothing you could throw at him that's going to faze him anymore. Then you also have to like the defensive line. I rate the defensive line 5th best in the country, the linebacking core 15th. In fact, Auburn's going to contend for best defense in the SEC this year, and the receiving core is solid. The biggest question marks I have are on the offensive line, as well as a running back. Last year when Kerryon Johnson was out, they struggled a little bit at the running back, especially in the postseason. They go from number 7 overall experience to number 70 on my experience chart. And then the schedule's pretty tough. They have to play Washington and Atlanta, Mississippi State on the road, and then at Georgia and at Alabama in a 3-week span. The schedules would really kept me from picking them higher than I did in the magazine.
We're talking to Phil Steele. Phil Steele, the publication that's awaiting you right now at your favorite grocery store, Walmart. I know they've got them available. I've seen them at some Sam stores as well. You've got great stores throughout that you can pick up the Phil Steele publication. But if you do not have one near you, you can simply go to philsteele.com. Phil, also at your projections on the national level, you've got Ohio State at number 3. I'm just curious, with everything that's happening there with Urban Meyer, does that impact your decision? Because I know the publication was written a few weeks prior to all this announcement around Ohio State. A lot of that's up in the air. How does that impact the Buckeyes, if at all?
Yeah, so far it doesn't impact it at all. And I personally think that Urban Meyer will be returning. And if that's the case, then there is no impact. Now, if there's speculation, possibly of him getting fired or something happens, then it may affect it. I mean, they do have 3 tough road games when you look at their schedule this year. They have to play TCU in Arlington, and of course Gary Patterson, a pretty good head coach, and then later they have to play Michigan State on the road and Penn State on the road, which are not going to be gimmies. And perhaps if an interim head coach is in there for the first time, as opposed to Urban Meyer, one of the best in the country, it would make an impact. But I don't like to speculate on things that haven't happened yet, so I'm going to stick with everything that I've got in the magazine.
Phil, let me ask you, when you look at the Washington Huskies, can this be a playoff team? Can they get back to maybe the success they had in the 2016 season that maybe was not there completely in the 2017 season? How about 2018? Could the Huskies be a part of the conversation?
Yeah, and I think this is the best team Chris Peterson has put on the field, whether it's at Boise State or Washington. He's got a veteran unit, 17 returning starters coming back this year. They rank very high on my experience chart. You look at him at quarterback. Jake Browning is a guy who had 43 touchdown passes 2 years ago. Last year he dropped down to 19.
Oh.
I think he regains his 2016 form. He's got decent receivers to throw to, a solid offensive line. They've got Myles Gaskin in the backfield. He's had 3 1,300-plus rushing seasons. Defensively, they lose a pretty good player, and I'm talking about Vita Vea at the defensive tackle spot. But 9 starters are back. Keep your eyes on Greg Gaines. He's going to have a very productive year at the DT spot. And overall, I rate him the number 5 defense in the country, the number 8 offense in the country. If they get past Auburn in the opener, they'll be favored in all the rest of their games. And while the Pac-12, everybody in the country is down on the Pac-12 right now, Washington can get everybody back on it. I think Washington's got a great shot at making the playoffs.
All right, going outside of that top tier teams, and maybe it's a team that's outside of the top 10, maybe it's a team that is outside of the top 15. Phil, give me a team that you think, with the things falling their way, maybe the ball bounces the right way for them, that could be a part of the conversation then in December that's not part of the college football playoff now. Is there a team outside of that top 10, top 15 team that you've got your eyes on, and if things happen, they could play their way into the playoffs?
Yeah, I do, Ryan. And that every year is my number one surprise team in the country. And my surprise team is a non-top 10 team that I think can actually contend for a playoff spot or even win the national title. Now, Washington was that team 2 years ago and made the playoffs. This year, that team is Notre Dame. And when I look at the Irish, last year they made one of my lists. They made my most improved list. They were number one on that last year, and they went from 4 wins to 10. And, in fact, in the month of November, they were ranked number 3 in the country and traveling and favored at Miami of Florida. Now, they lost 2 of their last 4 games, so they're off everybody's radar. They're not even going to be in the top 10 at the start of the year. But here's why I like the Irish. First of all, the team itself, very talented. They got 9 returning starters on defense, a top 10 D. They've got their quarterback back in Winbush. They also have a solid offensive line, and I like the skilled players. Then factor in the schedule. It's not easy. But you look at their 4 true road games this year: Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Northwestern, and USC, all definitely fall into the winnable category. Toughest home games are Stanford, Michigan, and Florida State, but all of them are at home. I could see the Irish getting to a 12-0 record this year, especially after going from 4 wins to number 3 in the country in November last year.
We are talking right now to Phil Steele. We're talking about the upcoming college football season, projections, expectations, the Phil Steele guide that's out right now that you can pick up at philsteele.com. And we're going to tell you more ways you can get in touch with Phil coming up a little bit later. Let me ask you about the Florida Gators. Is there enough in Gainesville that they can put up a couple of roadblocks for the Dogs from Athens?
I didn't call for it in the magazine, but they clearly have the shot, especially when you bring in a new head coach. A lot of times if they have success early on, the players really buy into what the new head coach is saying, and they have good deal success. Now, remember last year, Florida came into the season with high expectations, but they suspended 10 players in August, including their top rusher and top receiver from the previous year, and a good portion of the depth on the offensive line, defensive line, and linebacker. Then during the season, they suffered a lot of injuries. In fact, at one point in the month of November, they were down 28 scholarship players who were out either due to injury or suspension. That's a 30-year roster. They also were going through the coaching, interim head coach coming in, and it was a dumpster fire for Florida last year. But this year, Dan Mullen steps in. A great respect for Dan Mullen. Any Bulldog fan out there will tell you, I pick Mississippi State 6th or 7th in the SEC West every year, and yet every year he seemed to overachieve. So he gets the most out of the talent on hand, is known as a quarterback whisperer. He's had some pretty good QBs at Mississippi State, despite the fact they've only been 1-star or 2-star recruits. And then you factor in a couple other things. He's got a veteran squad to work with, 19 returning starters, one of the most experienced teams in the country. And that number 19 doesn't even include Jordan Scarlett, their outstanding running back from 2 years ago, who led the team in rushing and was suspended last year. Then you factor in the schedule. They have 3 true SEC road games. Now, unlike Auburn, who's playing some brutal road games, their road games are against Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and then Mississippi State, a team Dan Mullen knows the strengths and weaknesses of every player. So the road schedule's palatable, 2 FCS teams on the schedule. Florida could very well be 7-0 when they battle Georgia in the world's biggest cocktail party, even if I'm not supposed to say that anymore. And I think Florida would have that opportunity at that point. But for now, I'm definitely picking Georgia to win the East.
Bill, is there a mid-major team that can be this year's Central Florida that can go on a type of run? Not that they'll be a part of college football playoffs, but will make noise in the month of November, and we'll grab a lot of eyes, but probably not be a part of the conversation. Let me ask you about a mid-major team out there that grabs your attention.
I'm going to go with Boise State. And when I look at Boise State, they're a team that returns 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, Rippon's back at QB. They got their 1,000-yard rusher back from last year, a veteran offensive line. And then you look at the schedule. They do play Oklahoma State early in the season. Now, Oklahoma State's an inexperienced team. So Boise's definitely got a shot at going on the road to Stillwater and coming away with a win. And if they do, they'll be favored in all the rest of their games. They'll have a win over a pretty good opponent in Oklahoma State. Remember, UCF last year only had wins over a win over Maryland in the month of September. Well, I think Oklahoma State would be better than that. And if that's the case, you'd have an undefeated Boise State team at the end of the year at 13-0. And the other team, I'll throw it at you, and it's one that I don't expect them to repeat as it, but it could very well be UCF, because wouldn't that be some, if UCF ran the table this year, they would have a win streak of 25 straight wins, have beaten Auburn last year, and be talking about a potential playoff spot. But, with the over-under right now on UCF for the season is actually 9 in Vegas right now.
Phil, the final question, and I know this sounds like a generic question, but I'm really excited to hear what you say because of the respect that we have for you here in Tuscaloosa. Can you put it in words with your experience what Alabama and Nick Saban have been able to accomplish? I mean, it's even hard to say. 5 out of the last 9 years, they've won a national title. They're expected, according to your forecast, to be the national title again this year. And that would make it, I guess, very easy, 6 out of 10. Can you put it in words for us here in Tuscaloosa from your perspective, from your national seat there in Cleveland, Ohio, as you cover the game the way that you do? Can you put it in words what he's been able to accomplish?
Yeah, I just would use the word amazing. And, you go back, there's been dynasties in college football in the past. You go back with Bear Bryant, Barry Switzer, Bud Wilkerson. All those teams had long, dominant stretches. But the thing was, they were dealing with unlimited scholarships. Whereas now Nick Saban has got the limit of 85. It's big-time recruiting. Everybody's pulling players off of other teams. Bear Bryant used to sign a player just to make sure he didn't play for Tennessee. That's how deep they were. And so I think with Saban, 85 scholarships, and just the amazing run that they've had, clearly one of the best jobs ever in college football, if not the best.
All right, so we know we can get stuff on ESPN Insider, which is behind the wall. We've got Phil Steele Plus. I'd like for you to talk about that and give more information how folks can get more of what Phil Steele's analysis as we progress through the season.
Well, you're a heck of a guy, Ryan. Yeah, Phil Steele Plus basically gets the stats updated for you in the magazine on a weekly basis, and they're color-coded green and red. Green for good numbers, red for bad. And at a glance, you could see where teams are struggling and where they're really excelling. I find it vital in analyzing the college teams on the season. Now, you can go to philsteele.com for more information there. And then I have a weekly newsletter. It's called Inside the Press Box. Now, when you go to InsideThePressBox.com, you'll get information on how to get inside the press box. And this year, we're going to be giving away a free Phil Steele Plus, which is a $69 value membership to all those that sign up for Inside the Press Box. So go to InsideThePressBox.com. You will get my selections on every game the entire season. You'll see I'd always talk about my 9 sets of computer numbers. You'll see what all my sets of computer numbers have on every game. You get a projected box score, not only the points scored, but the yards rushing, yards passing for all the teams. And you'd be amazing how close those stats are at the end of the year. So just go to InsideThePressBox.com. Get more information on my weekly newsletter and forecasts on every game for the entire season.
Well, with this season, this opening up with in our neighboring state, 35, 40 minutes away from where we are at, we're going to be talking about in the state of Mississippi, they're opening up, investment opportunities, I guess is the best way to say that, investment opportunities in 2018 going over in the Magnolia State. So I guess all the information people can soak in, go check it out. philsteele.com. The publication's one of those that's a must-have. It's not a need to. You must have it if you're going to be watching college football this year. Phil, I appreciate you coming on in Tuscaloosa. Always enjoy catching up with you, my friend. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. Always enjoy chatting football with you, my friend. Have yourself a great one.